Gentlemen, you are both drunk on cosmic wine.
Welcome to the show. I'm Dr. Mark Sylvester.
And I'm Dr. Richard Schulman. This is Alt Psych.
Man, I love that intro.
Me too. Do we have an intro?
Yeah.
Yes, we do. It's got like
watched it.
It's got Pink Floyd music on it.
Ooh, we're not allowed to say that.
It's got Floyd Pink music on it.
Thank you. Speaking of mixing,
Pink Floyd.
Yeah, Sigmund Freud. No, speaking of mixing things up, that's a little bit what our topic is today: synesthesia, where your brain mixes some stuff up. And I'm sorry, I'm being told it's deja vu, not menage a trois.
Well, Yogi Berra said deja vu all over again.
There you go. This is why I wore this shirt, by the way, because it's kind of like, I feel like it's stunning my senses as it moves. No, you're not getting that?
Well,
it's giving me some like trippy.
Yeah, it's a little trippy.
So in honor of synesthesia, I wore my eye-bending vertical stripes. But yeah, this is a fun topic because I like the ones that everyone can relate to. More so the deja vu side of things than the synesthesia, but a fair number of people have experienced synesthesia.
I like the synesthesia thing because it opens the idea that there's more to our mind than we think. You know, and that's part of the reason for doing this whole gig.
It is, and it gives like a real specific proof, I guess, of yeah, there's more to our mind than what we think, and it kind of even helps. Yeah, hopefully by the end of the show, people can realize or deconstruct a little bit how we construct consensus reality, how the brain perceives time, space, inputs, whether that through the five senses. And synesthesia is very fascinating because, well, let's define it first, right? It's basically a perceptual phenomenon in which the stimulation of one sensory or cognitive pathway leads to the involuntary experience of a second sensory or cognitive pathway. Boring, that's kind of dry, but I think giving by example is always simplest. So people have heard of the possibility of the brain to see smells or hear, touch, and it's a little bit mind bending. But hopefully, when we go through a lot of the forms of synesthesia and specific examples of it, it's fun. It bends your brain a little bit, but these things really do occur. So before we get right down to it, let's do the mental wealth tip of the day.
Well, the mental wealth tip today is about anger, and it depends whether you prefer to listen to Mark Twain or Buddha. Basically the same idea. Mark Twain said that anger is a poison that disturbs the vessel. Let's see, I was here. Disturbs the vessel in which it is stored more than anything else on which it is poured. It's got that little rhythmic thing going. Buddha had it pretty cool. He said that anger is like taking poison and expecting the other guy to die. And if you look at the effects on anger on physiology and interpersonal relationships, they both had it right.
Yeah, but wasn't Mark Twain that he was talking about acid, not a poison, right?
Oh, anger is an acid, right?
That's right. So it's this corrosive. I like that because it's this corrosive thing that is continuing to damage its very vessel that it's stored in, and you got to get the evil out. You got to let the anger go, or it will just continue to do what it does best, and that's be caustic and eat its way out.
So I think it was a Don Henley song talked about that too.
Really?
Yeah. Keep carrying that anger; it's going to eat you up inside.
Yeah, he probably
I'm learning to live with that. Great song, by the way.
I think that's a great mental health tip because right now, and always, but especially now, we have people hanging on to serious amounts of anger, and anger at a lot of different things. Anger about what's going on in the world, whether that's with the health of the country and the world, or election stuff, or
I can't tell if as a society we're more addicted to anger or just programmed to respond that way. But either way, boy, it's floating in the air.
it is dripping heavily from the walls. You know,
I
I
could,
can smell it. Oh my God, I'm having synesthesia right now. I'm just kidding. But
well,
that would be it.
I like the idea of synesthesia because it just opens up a bigger brain, a bigger,
Well,
maybe a bigger life experience.
the bloody Greeks were the ones that coined this phrase, which
Oh,
I especially like. But I always assumed that the Greeks was like, you know, like I always picture a Turkish bathhouse or this Greek, you know,
no, I remember my kid coming home
Caligula type of
from
stuff.
school in high school going, "Hey, Dad, we're studying the Greeks. Imagine a culture based on beauty and art." Yeah, that is pretty cool, isn't it?
Yeah, boy, I miss them. But the bloody Greeks were the ones that coined the term, which sin means together, and
Mhm.
aesthesis or something means sensation. So together sensation is synesthesia. And the oldest, I guess, recorded case of synesthesia that I could find, which clearly the Greeks coined it, so it goes way, 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 way back. But the documented case in kind of, I guess, modern times that's most reliable was from the year 1690. That's pretty far back. That's pretty far back. But it was really interesting because it was John Locke, right, the great philosopher and professor at Oxford. He was referring to a blind man, I guess, that experienced a color. I think it was like scarlet, purple, or whatever. Every time he heard the sound of a trumpet. So that's one type. We're going to get into the types, but I want to quiz you on some types. So don't
Yeah,
cheat.
I hope I pass.
Don't cheat. Don't cheat. It looks better if you're completely ignorant
Well, then I can do that one
to
really
try not to get too many right, is what I'm saying.
well. Okay, I'm good at that.
But you know, even some people say, no, John Locke, he was talking metaphorically, not literally. But
Well,
synesthesia,
wait a second. Well, maybe the brain works metaphorically. I
yeah,
don't
well,
know.
maybe they didn't think to ask that.
I guess
But
he didn't think he'd be on the internet.
you know, when I was thinking about synesthesia, it's usually the switching or blurring of two senses, right? We have consensus agreement that we have five uh, senses. So I was running the math on it and I was thinking, okay, well, if you have five senses and any two of them can get mixed up, that would be 2 to the fifth power, right? Which is 36. So at first I thought, oh man, there's 36 different ways your brain can mess this up. I was way off because not only can you get two mixed up, you can get three mixed up, you can get four mixed up, and that number goes way up. As a matter of fact, I think there's over 80 um, types of synesthesia that can occur with any combination of the number of senses or even cognitive pathways. So they kind of cluster them, I guess, into the two overall forms. One is like the projective synesthesia, which I think more people are familiar with that kind. That's people who, you know, actually see colors, forms, or shapes when stimulated by another sense or whatever. It's the wildly understood version of synesthesia for people who are somewhat familiar to it. But then you got this associative synesthesia, which is a little bit even more mind blowing, where people feel a very strong and involuntary connection between the stimulus and then the sense that it triggers. So, I mean, are we ready to get right into quiz time? Put
Well,
away your books and get out your
as long as
pencils.
you're hoping for some wrong answers, I can supply you with some. But
Yeah.
of course, it occurs to me that this could be a really creative thing.
What, quizzing you or synesthesia in general?
Well, more the synesthesia, but quizzing me, because I went to school for like most of my early life, middle life. I had to be quick dancing on my feet and answering questions like this. So go ahead.
Well, even if you get them right, then I'll just say they're wrong and tell you the
Okay,
same thing that you said. But
it works.
I think one of the most common that people are familiar with is this grapheme color synesthesia, or color graphemic or something, which letters or numbers are perceived as inherently colored. And that's actually not that uncommon. And it's really kind of interesting. So, for instance, people think of three, they may think of green. And if they think of four, they may think of blue, and five, red, so on. What's interesting is the next person with the same type of synesthesia might assign, purple to three. They don't obviously line up. So there's a certain randomness to it that suggests it's heavily neurological, as opposed to there being some sort of objective reality somewhere where three is always polka dot, pink and purple or something.
Well,
That's
is it the same color? Do people report this, or it's just consistent for the person? I'm just
just
wondering.
consistent for the person.
Okay.
So it's like cells that fire together, wire together. And at
Yeah.
some point, three gets tied up with green in this person. The next person, odds are, it won't be, even if they have the exact same type. It's similar to the chromesthesia, but that has to do with sounds, right? Basic sounds, just normal day in, day out sounds, like a car honking, or hearing someone's voice.
What occurs to me as we're talking about this, and like, people will have these experiences and never talk about them because they think it means they're crazy, and
Or they ignore it
or both.
because
And maybe that's why they ignore it. But if we go back into the idea of non-ordinary mind, which I like to remind myself every so often of why we're doing this, is that it's not crazy. In fact, it's part of the human experience. And apparently it comes in a lot of different flavors.
well, like we were talking before the show with Cherry Garcia, he was someone that reported chromesthesia, like where colors are actually triggered when certain musical notes or keys are
He
played.
actually, what I read was he actually saw the notes. He would see them hanging in the air, and he'd
Mm.
know which we just like pick them out, and play
But
them.
they had colors too, right?
Yes, they had colors. The different notes had colors.
Which there's some people that believe that has a positive effect on their ability to not only memorize music, but have perfect pitch. It facilitates both, which is interesting. Makes sense, because now instead of just one sense, you're using two. So it's going to be more indelible of a memory.
Right, right.
So it's generally seen as a superpower, even though arguably there's some situations where it's seen like malfunction or a short circuiting of the brain's observation. All right, here's a quiz question for you. What's the spatial sequence or number form synesthesia?
Um,
No cheating.
I'm looking for a funny answer.
Oh,
Spatial sequence or number form? Let's see. I don't know. What is it?
so
That's the wrong
this
answer.
one's a little esoteric. It's a little obscure. So that may be when numbers or months of the years or days of the week or whatever, they elicit precise locations in space.
Wow.
So like 1980 might be further away than 1990, or may appear as a three-dimensional map.
Wow. I've
Yeah.
had patients talk about that when they were in trance, like going through a timeline. Very often they'll talk about a tube that they go through in the various, I don't know what to call that, I guess it's a timeline where they go through their lives, and anyway, it's close to what you said.
Yeah, I've heard similar stuff. This is a fun one. You don't hear too much. Auditory tactile synesthesia. Take a stab at what that is.
Or auditory tactile? Well, it would have to be sounds create a tactile feeling in your body.
Yeah, and sometimes even like very specific. So when you always hear B flat, it causes, tingling on your right shoulder blade, or
I have
very
experienced
specific.
certain progressions will cause certain feelings. certain combinations of vibrations will cause certain feelings. I don't know if that's the
When
same.
you say feelings, do you mean emotions or feelings as in sensations, like touch, tactile?
It's probably more emotions, but I have felt the other one too. Feel a
Yeah.
tingling in my spine, uh, when certain things are played. Mostly kind of anthemic thing. Beethoven kind of stuff will do it. And I guess The Who and some of the other rock bands. Yeah.
I I think that's less common. I didn't rank these in order because I don't know.
Mhm.
I just think they're all a little bit fascinating, like ordinal linguistic personification, or sometimes they just call it personification for short, which is weird. But it's a type of synesthesia in which ordinal numbers, so like ordered sequences or weekday names, or months or alphabetical letters, are associated with personalities or genders.
Wow. Does this have to be involuntary? Can you train yourself to do it?
I think that I'm sure you could train yourself to do it, but that's not synesthesia because, like you said, it's the involuntary component. Like you can't not see purple when you see the number three. They just coexist.
Okay.
Whereas, it'd be like only seeing half of the number in effect.
Understood. Yeah, that makes sense.
So it's kind of fascinating how the brain uses simultaneous senses, um, to give the observer information. Like there's a neurologic disorder called misophonia, um, which I would like to say I suffer from heavily, and basically that's when certain sounds can trigger negative experiences, or emotions, but an experience like, and this is a little bit like Manchurian Candidate, a little bit. When you hear the certain sequence of a sound, and then it puts you into a pre-programmed, I must shoot the ambassador or whatever. It's similar to that. Now, the way I suffer for it is every time I hear my wife listening to country music, I just have a sudden urge for homicidal rage. But
You broke my heart, so I broke your jaw. Yeah, there you go.
how
Hmm.
about, what mirror touch synesthesia is? This is a cool one.
I think I'm not sure. It's you touch somebody else and I feel you touch them, something like that.
Yep, yep, yep. So they feel the same sensation that another person feels.
How's that
So,
different from empathy?
well, empathy doesn't directly give you, the
Okay,
tactile input. I mean, that one blows my mind a little bit because that could be more measurable in a lab. Like, hey, these people are called synesthetes, by the way. I don't know if I said that.
right.
Tell your synesthete, close your eyes, and then, I tap my shoulder kind of thing. Do they feel it? Magicians do a similar trick like that. Interestingly enough, I've seen them do that, where they touch someone else and then they ask not the synesthete, but who would normally be the synesthete, where do you feel yourself being touched? And they've got a blindfold on and all of that, and everyone's watching it on stage, and then they'll say, "Oh, right cheek," and sure enough, the magician's touching a volunteer on the right cheek.
Mm.
Kind of gets the hair standing up. And I'm sure that's a trick, but that's exactly what they're talking about here, in mirror touch synesthesia.
It's all kind of a trick,
We got two more types.
Okay, let's go.
This is the rarest one. I like
Okay.
this one too. Lexical gustatory synesthesia. Go. What do you think
Oh,
that is?
that would have to be gustatory's got to be like taste or something like that. It's got to be a word. You taste the word, something like that.
This is exactly what it is. So, like lexicon, certain tastes are experienced when hearing certain words. So, like you may hear the word volleyball, and all of a sudden you taste mint, or you may hear the word car, and then taste almonds in the back of your throat, or and to me, there's a randomness to it, It's not like yellow and lemon or banana.
Yeah, I was thinking
It's
that.
it's almost just this weird wiring or cross firing, where that cells that wouldn't normally fire together or now start wiring together, which
Wouldn't you?
that's a
Okay,
fun one.
okay, we got one more, right?
Yeah, time for a shameless plug. I mean,
Yes,
my throat was dry.
it's right here, right
This
now.
one, this one's the toughest of all. This one's pretty rare too, but it's like the layered when we were talking about. It's not just two senses crossing. You can blur them all up, but kinesthetic synesthesia is like a combination of other types of synesthesia. So there are features that appear similar to like auditory, tactile synesthesia, for example, but the sensations are not isolated just to the individual numbers or letters, but more complex systems of relationships. So it's basically talking about the interplay between 3, 4, and even 5 senses, which sounds a little bit like what a schizophrenic perceives. You know, just this overwhelming
Overload, yeah.
input stimulus. But like we were talking about at the beginning of the show, you can use these superpowers to your advantage to help memory or maybe do parlor tricks.
I would think creativity, that gives you a kind of a different perspective on things. And that's what, to me, what a lot of creativity is. You put it together differently.
Certainly
Yeah.
creativity.
Yeah, I hear you. I
I think
hear
I'm upside down and backwards.
you.
That's a good example. And my shirt. But our token dead white guy of the day. Oh, I'm sorry. It's a white girl. But anyway, I was at the University of Edinburgh. Julia Simner found that spatial sequence synesthetes have a built-in and automatic mnemonic reference tool. Basically, that's a fancy way of saying they unconsciously use their powers of synesthesia to improve their memory, the accuracy and the intensity, maybe the duration of time that they remember it, because it's just simply more encoded. It's kind of like a check, recheck set of program.
Something that just occurred to me. When you study neurolinguistic programming, for example, you find that people's inner worlds are different. A person may be visual. Personally, I'm very auditory. I if you I don't need to put on a stereo to hear the Beatles. I can hear them in my head whenever I want. But I don't really visually. I can't see a Van Gogh painting in my head. Um, Most people are more visual, but it does occur to me that people use all three internally. A lot of, visual, kinesthetic, and auditory, and people can get triggered uh, by odors. The smells will create profound memories. I'm just wondering if, and I don't know that there's an answer that, easy answer, but it does occur to me that that's where this stuff comes from, that we do have that superpower.
Well, maybe that's not synesthesia in and of itself, but it shows you the power and importance of it because, like you said, if a smell can take you immediately back to a vivid childhood memory, it supports the theory that when you were laying down that memory, whether that was, you were taking in data from your eyes and your ears, and, if you're outside, the sun on your skin, um, and then the smell they say is the deepest rooted and connected and reinforcing to memory. Then when you just go back in, who cares that it's 30 years later, and you
Right.
introduce just that smell goes to the same set of neurons that tells you what that smell is, but along with it is this other memory it stumbles across, which it lights up like a Christmas tree, and all of a sudden, boom, you're right back there. Kind of the associative learning, or the associative synesthesia is really what it's closest to.
The things that usually concern me as I think about it are creativity, healing, and also spirituality. What does this phenomenon mean from the higher level? And it just most of the phenomena that we talk about beg for a higher level of creativity, of emotional healing, and even spirituality, just an acceptance of who we are as spiritual beings. And I don't know why, but I'm very drawn to this one, and I know our next topic will go right in even more deeply into that whole idea of our spiritual nature.
Cool. Well, let's be a buzzkill then and talk about a lot of the explanations for synesthesia that aren't, you know, necessarily consciousness based, because synesthesia is seen certainly in a lot of other conditions, um, and thought to be a malfunction of neurobiology, like after a traumatic brain injury, for example, or a stroke or a brain tumor. Or temporal lobe epilepsy. Actually, there's a high incidence of epilepsy triggering synesthesia, synesthetic events and perceptions, which supports this as more purely, you know, neurophysiologic derangement or however you want to think about it. But it also can include sensory deprivation, sleep deprivation, um, even less malfunctioning type of situations like meditation or even concentration or sleep deprivation would be another one that I already said. My favorite one, and that's the most interesting to me, are the psychedelics, specifically LSD here with synesthesia, because synesthesia is not an uncommon experience during an acid trip, an LSD trip. And that's always fascinated me. I actually studied this when I was doing a master's level program in neuroscience primarily. But everything that we know about chemicals in the brain, whether they're endogenous or exogenous, that, you know, chemicals coming from within or pills or drugs that we eat, really doesn't explain how LSD is able to cause synesthesia, or furthermore, shatter the walls of perception. It is amazing, I guess, from a biochemical and a neuropsychopharmacological viewpoint. Of course, on the other hand, military used this. It's a terrific way to take out large troop battalions. It's very easy to transport. It's, you know, LSD specifically is tasteless and odorless. It's clear. If you can get it into a water supply of a country or a city, or even somehow get it into troops. The British did, I think you can still find this on the internet. It's a pretty hilarious experiment where they effectively dosed these people unwittingly, and they completely fell apart. They were unable to follow the drill sergeant's commands. They were just basically tripping. But what fascinates me is that you're talking about millionths of a gram. That does not make sense to me pharmacologically, how something in such a trace amount can cause such a massive perturbation in the way that the brain assembles the senses and all of the inputs. So to me, that shows we don't really know as much as we think that we do, because, you know, it's serotonergic at the same time, but nobody gets stuff like this on high dose serotonergic drugs. And they're on orders of magnitude, thousands and thousands of times more concentrated than LSD. So something is unique, I think, to LSD, or maybe even psilocybin and some of the other drugs that are capable of doing this, that show a disconnect in some of the regions of the brain, which I think we have coming up, unless I cut it out. Temporal lobe stuff, parietal lobe stuff, angular gyrus. I can't remember if I include that. Let's see. Oh yeah, we're talking about the mechanism. That's definitely hotly debated. I'm intrigued by it because, not for the military applications, for our understanding of consciousness and the way that we assemble our perceptions and our reality. Matter of fact, we talked about Bruce Grayson before in the University of Virginia, and the name of that department that really studies these non-ordinary states is the Division of Perceptual Studies. Wow. And they're specifically looking at the way the brain perceives, interprets based on inputs and data, which is pretty fascinating. There is a lot of genetic component in synesthetes. which lends some theories as to why it occurs. It could be more neuroanatomical or definitely neurogenetic. But,
Well, I
even
mean, if you want to play in the NBA, pick tall parents.
yeah,
And
you get to pick your
there's
parents.
variability in anything that human beings do. So some people are better at this, genetically predisposed. That makes perfect sense to me.
Oh, I think that we talk about a genetic component in deja vu as well, but the genetics, it gets a little bit overly complex for our purposes of pontification here. But they really are looking for genes that might be responsible for synesthesia and multiple forms of inheritance and epigenetic components and um, oligogenic conditions, which is something called locus heterogeneity. It's like penetrance kind of thing, affect it all. However, we do know women are more likely to experience synesthesia than men, about 8 times more likely. No one knows why, though. I think it has to do with the way their brains operate, just generally differently than maybe a male's, or maybe it's the thickness of our skulls. I don't know.
The architecture is definitely different.
And the probability of being left-handed with synesthesia is higher,
Okay.
um, which is interesting. There was a guy, Alexander Luria, who had the rarest form of similar to the kinesthetic synesthesia, where basically all 5 of his senses were blurred and interacting, which it's rare to have. It's rarer to have 3 than 2 and 4 than 3, etc. So this guy was confirmed to have all 5 senses whacked out or mixed up. And I wish I could ask him, hey, do you have a sixth sense going there? Like when you see the color red, can you tell me what the future holds tomorrow? Or maybe when you see green, you can see dead people. I don't know, but that would be neat.
That's
But we,
fun.
we talked before the show. There's a lot of famous people that claim to experience this. Well, we already said Jerry Garcia, Billy Joel, Ishtak Perlman, one of my idols, very famous violinist. A lot of these are musicians, which I found interesting as well. Tesla comes up again. I was surprised to see him in my research showing up.
He's all over the place.
He was using, I think, all of his brain all of the time.
Yeah, pretty amazing
Um,
guy.
and of course, we talked about lucid dreaming and being inspired by music as well. That kind of fit in there with it. Um, Mickey Hart, the drummer, also wrote about experiences with synesthesia. He wrote a book called Drumming at the Edge of Magic. Pharrell Williams, isn't he the happy guy? I'm so
Don't
happy.
worry,
I think
be
so.
happy.
And there's a couple groups here that are probably things that younger people listen to. I didn't know the Neptunes. And so that's, arts and culture, but it's also really interesting to remind yourself that we are the sum of our perceptions and our inputs and the stimulus that we get. So a totally blind person is going to have a different experience than the rest of our consensus reality. And I think, if I may be so bold, we've learned over the last year, especially, that that different people interpret the same objective facts completely different. I mean, we've already known that, but to the degree at which it's gone in the last year has been very fascinating and puzzling to
Well,
me.
also there are at least anecdotal tales of manipulation of the experience of senses. I remember when I was studying hypnosis, there was a anecdote from Ernest Hilgard, who wrote several books on hypnosis, where in the class his students said, "Well, could you hypnotize a blind person to be also deaf?" And so they did. And the guy, they were like clanging pots and pans next to him and he wasn't reacting. And then somebody in the class said, "Do you think there's a part of him that actually hears this?" So we asked the guy, if there's a part of you who hears me, raise the index finger of your right hand. The guy goes like this. Then when they interviewed him, they had a kinesthetic cue to bring him back. But he said, well, what were you guys doing? It got really quiet. And then all of a sudden, I had this urge to raise the index finger of my right hand. Hilgard postulated that there was a hidden observer in all of us that was taking everything in. And I don't know if that really explains kinesthesia, but it might, because
I think it does.
If we have all the senses going all the time, I mean, we're not all like Luria, and have them all mashed up, because it is probably, more efficient to separate them. But they might all be there all at once. So
I like that. I like that theory. And I got lots of theories about deja vu. Well, not really.
I got theories about everything, man. Deja vu, as Yogi Berra said, deja vu all over again.
Or as the French say, deja vu.
Yes, they do.
We misspelled the vu, but that was for some confusing reasons. But I think everyone's had. We were talking earlier today. Do you know anyone who hasn't experienced deja vu? So
No,
it's certainly much more common.
I really don't. I think everybody's had that,
Similar to the knowing who's calling before the phone rings.
Well, my own experience was really profound. When I was in China at the Emperor's Palace, I just seemed to know where everything was, and I felt unbelievably at home. In fact, my ex said to me, "You've been here before, right?" I said, "No." "Well, you seem to know where everything is." I said, "I know. It's very weird."
Yeah, well, that could be a reincarnation thing. It could be genetic memory from your descendants. It could be something as simple as deja vu, or
I think it's a little
really cool we don't know about.
That was a better. I mean, it's stronger than just feeling really at home in a certain place.
It's
Like,
the recollection.
And I feel it in places like I felt very at home in Jerusalem and very at home in London. It's funny, I grew up in New York. I never really felt that at home in New York, but there are certain places, and I don't know if it's just vibrational but that experience in the Emperor's Palace, I like this word, was uncanny.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I think that to be a real deja vu, it has to be a little more uncanny than just feeling like, oh, well, I really like it here, or I feel
Sure. Well, let's define it. I mean, one definition is the feeling one's lived through the present situation before. Or more specifically, I like the definition that it's an anomaly of memory where, despite the strong sense of recollection, the time, place, and practical context of the what would be previous experience is highly dubious, uncertain, or even believed to be impossible. Like, you knew that you hadn't been there before. It wasn't like now, because you've seen it on TV. Yeah, we can always do these other considerations to rule out any good observer or scientist would. But this is one that, it's very hard to convince someone in the middle of a deja vu or a menage a trois for that matter.
You like that French
that experience, that memory isn't real, because your brain is telling you it's real.
But it sounds like it's different than knowing who's going to be on the phone. That you're actually, who's going to be on the phone is just a tiny slice.
Well, it's precognition of an
Yeah.
event versus the entire experience. And it almost has a predictive value to it, right? Like, oh, I recognize this, and I'm in this viewpoint that I'm looking at is familiar, and in my clothes and my age and maybe some of the smells, all of it is familiar. So familiar that
story. He was in Japan on a conference, and they brought him to this place they don't usually let foreigners go, and he said that he felt that he had been there already, and he described the place, and he said, there used to be a bridge over here, and the people who he was with looked at each other and said, "How would you know that? There was a bridge over there."
Right. So that could be really remembering a past event. something very easily explainable. It could be a reincarnation thing, that it's a soul memory.
I
It
wonder
could
if
be
it's
like we talked about, the genetic descendants and those memories locked in your DNA that you absorbed when your human was formed.
well,
Um,
when I think about these kinds of things, and believe it or not, actually try to be practical about it. You play a C chord on a piano, there's another piano there, it's going to resonate to that C chord. And I wonder if it has to do with our openness to the vibrational sense of place,
it
that
could
that you
be.
just
I mean,
resonate with it. I
I
never
like
thought
that.
about it like that before, but it does. It made a certain amount of sense to me, that because I think about resonating vibration, when you just, for what seems like no reason, you meet somebody and you really like them, you really connect, and certain places make us feel really comfortable.
Or in the Matrix, it was a glitch in the Matrix. It was a sign of a glitch in the Matrix. Or it can also be some people think it's evidence of parallel universes somehow overlapping temporarily. So you're simultaneously experiencing, the alternate you is simultaneously experiencing the same thing as the parallel universe, and your minds kind of merge temporarily, and there's this double um, sampling, double perception, and that's what comes out. That's actually kind of an interesting thought to blow your skull, because some do interpret as paranormal, some view it as purely neurologic, and usually a sign of dysfunction. But like we talked about, there's a lot of strengths in synesthesia, and people who have had it their whole life, they assume everyone else is that way. Or it's not that big of a deal to them. Like a colorblind person adapts from a very young age, and they're used to, you know, seeing colors differently.
Okay.
But there are two types of deja vu, just like there were two types, main, categories of synesthesia, which is kind of cool because I've never heard this before.
Me neither. Not till you told me.
Well, the pathological type, right, which is the one that can be associated with epilepsy or other symptoms like hallucinations or psychiatric illness, which we've seen. I've certainly seen that. And then the non-pathologic type, which is kind of under pressure, or people in more fragile conditions, or no, younger age, they're more likely to experience deja vu. And it's kind of an enjoyable thing because it's a familiarity. Who doesn't like to feel familiarity?
It was, to me, it was actually, it was absolutely familiar. When I realized what was going on, it was kind of exciting, actually, to have that experience.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's fascinating. I always pause and observe, and then sometimes try to predict. Like, do I have a sense that someone's going to walk through the door wearing a red T-shirt? And then observe and see if I'm having that thought, if it
Yeah, that's it.
occurs.
That's it.
But they could be experiencing temporal lobe epilepsy, or migraines are another thing, usually with aura, that is associated with deja vu. Um, Less so dissociative phenomenon, which we've talked about, which I would have thought might be actually even higher. Oh, and then the genetics, they literally are studying this gene, LG2, I think it is. It's on chromosome 10. They think that there's a link to deja vu, but I haven't read all of the studies, but it sounds to me like it's, correlation doesn't imply causality, but they're on the right track. And it's kind of interesting that they were even looking at genes for this. Um, but but on the same token, certain forms of that gene are associated with epilepsy, which is then associated with deja vu. Um, and then the opposite of deja vu is a fun one, which a lot of people have never heard of. I was surprised. Um, Jamais vu, which is the opposite, really. And it occurs as well during simple partial seizures, but that's where something should be familiar to you. Logically, you know it, but you get the sense that it's strange or foreign or abstract. Um, like one of the things, I'm surprised a lot of psychiatrists haven't heard about this, because this was one of the coolest things to learn in whatever psychiatry school. But I think we've talked about capgras on here too. It's a specific type of a delusion. And logically, you're looking at a loved one saying, you look like my loved one, you sound like my loved one, but you are not my loved one. You're not familiar to me. You're somehow foreign. I don't know if you're an alien inhabiting their body, but they are very sure that they are not who they appear to be. And it's kind of thought to be the opposite of deja vu or jamais vu, which certain medications have even caused that type of delirium. Amantadine, phenylpropylamine. A lot of these are tryptamines or phenylethylamines, which end up in the psychedelic category too, or have some psychedelic property. Like amantadine might cause a delirium similar to mucimol, which is in the mushroom Amanita muscaria, which is what amantadine is named for. So you could go down the rabbit hole there. I don't have time to go into the depth on the other types of deja vu, but there are types. There's are more of the explanations, like a split perception, and you can look up any of these, and we'll put them in the comments. Memory based, cryptomnesia, which is kind of like the restructuring or reconstruction of a memory. Dual neurologic processing, which is interesting and complicated. There's a dream based explanation. And you can sometimes also fatigue the brain into causing this. Like there was a big study where they had these volunteers write the word door, and I've done this on accident. It's kind of, and they talked about this in movies. I forget what was it, Tommy Boy, when he kept saying road. That's such a weird word, road. Keep saying it, road. And they kept saying road, and then they realized how weird the word sounds. They did a similar thing. They let them write the word door. Most people know how to spell door. Write it 30 times in 60 seconds, and 68% of the people reported symptoms of jamais vu. Some beginning to doubt that the word door was even a real word, or it just looked really, really weird, just simply from writing it. So it's thought to be a fatigue of that pathway of the associative meaning of door and the representation it does within the brain, and kind of bringing up all the programs to say, okay, door is usually this thing, and it's usually spelled this way, and it's found in these places, and I got whacked in the face one time with one. All of that information comes up at the same time as door. So you could be fatiguing these pathways by repeatedly stimulating the door input. I mean, I can't make this stuff up. This is our neurobiology. We're prisoners of it.
I wouldn't call us prisoners of it. I would say if you have awareness, you can surf the wave. You know, it's about self-awareness, self-knowledge. I don't look at it like prisoners.
Should we give our viewers homework? Should we give them homework?
Sure.
Because there are, you think deja vu and jamais vu are going down the rabbit hole. There were 5 other intense feelings of similar type of phenomenon that I ran across. One called deja vécu, one called presque vu, one called deja rêvé. I don't know, it's all French to me. One called deja entendu, and one called deja vu, apparently. But it's spelled different. It's a pun based on what we were talking about before, already you, rather than already seen. So, deja vécu is the feeling that you've already lived through the present situation. But it has behavioral consequences, and it's an intense feeling of familiarity. The closest thing I ever had to anything like that, I woke up one time in my bed in college. I don't think I was doing anything wild or wacky. It was just like an early morning, almost like a hypnopompic period. When I woke up, it was probably about 6 a.m, and the light was just coming in. And I had a very clear feeling that I was an 80, in my 80s. I felt like I was 80 years old, and the bedroom in the house that I slept in every single night seemed extremely foreign to me, almost as if I was looking back 60 years on it, like, oh my gosh, I remember that place. Whoa, it looked like this. And it was one of the weirdest experiences. And I don't remember how quickly it went away, but it's similar to the deja vu.
It's
And then
the
you can go on and on with these other ones.
it's the first line in Slaughterhouse-Five. Billy Pilgrim has become unstuck in time. Yeah, that's. I read that line. I said, "This book is going to be for me."
It's a little Benjamin Button too.
A little bit, yeah.
Um,
So, do you have a thought about next week?
well, I mean, we're talking about all the different ways you can shatter the walls of perception. I mean, let's go for psychedelics and nootropics. It's a big
Okay.
topic. It's a big docket. Daddy's scared, but we'll tackle it together.
Okie
And
dokie, Smokey.
it may be the first part in another 486 part series, but
Well, it's funny. For other people, this is non-ordinary mind. For us, this is part of being human, and it's
yeah, it's the
non-ordinary.
ordinary mind.
Right. Okay, so I think it's time to wrap up.
Yep, all good things must come to an end. So I guess we got to try to time again.
I'll try it. I'll try to
Every
do
time
that.
you add another
Yeah, I'm not going to do it
count
this
to it.
time. Ready? One,
Wait, what
two,
are we doing?
what?
We going on 3 or 4
Yeah, I was
or
going
5?
to do it.
We're just
One,
gonna do it.
two, three. Be
Be
well.
well. So you went on 3 that time.
I said three.
Oh, I can't hear you.
One.
That's not in my
I think
ears.
I said three. Maybe I said three and I saw four.
Yeah, I felt the color blue when that happened.
Okay.
Actually, yeah.
Everybody have a pleasant week amidst the chaos.
Konnichiwa.